She helped the billionaire CEO reconnect with his lost mother. I donated to your foundation because it was the only way I could still be part of my son's life, the elderly woman said, her voice breaking as she gripped the edges of her worn cardigan. Even if he never knew I was there. Elijah Winters stood frozen, $8 billion in his bank account, suddenly meaningless as he stared at the mother he'd abandoned 20 years ago. You've been here? All this time? His voice cracked, the powerful CEO now reduced to a lost boy. Why didn't you tell me she was here? He demanded, turning to Adele. Because you weren't ready to listen, Adele replied softly. Not until you found something more valuable than success. Have you ever built an empire of wealth only to discover it was constructed on a foundation of emptiness? When the silence in your penthouse becomes deafening and the numbers in your bank account feel like hieroglyphics from a dead language? This is the story of a man who had everything money could buy, yet stood bankrupt in everything that truly mattered. A story that might make you question what success really means in your own life. The Manhattan skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, a fitting backdrop for the man Forbes had dubbed the music tech maverick. Elijah Winters stood alone in his penthouse office, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand as he stared at the city below. At 42, he had conquered the music industry with Resonance Technologies, the streaming platform that had revolutionized how the world consumes sound. The quarterly reports lay open on his desk. Another record-breaking quarter. Another billion added to the company valuation. Another reason for the board to worship at his altar of genius. Yet something was wrong. The numbers that once thrilled him now seemed meaningless, symbols that no longer sparked joy or satisfaction. What happens when you achieve everything you thought you wanted, only to discover it wasn't what you needed? The question lingered in the air around him, unanswered and haunting. His office phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. Mr. Winters. His assistant's voice was crisp, professional. The London investment team has been waiting on the video call for 10 minutes. Should I tell them you're on your way? Elijah glanced at his watch. 9:30 p.m. He'd completely forgotten. Cancel it, he said, surprising himself with the words. Reschedule for next week. Sir? Confusion colored her tone. Mr. Sheffield flew in specifically for this call, and the team has been preparing for... I said cancel it, Vanessa. His voice was soft but left no room for argument. Something's come up. Nothing had come up. Nothing except the overwhelming certainty that he couldn't spend another minute pretending to care about market projections when this emptiness was consuming him from within. After ending the call, Elijah moved to his desk and opened his laptop. Without thinking, his fingers typed a name he hadn't searched in 11 years. Adele Alloway. The search results appeared instantly. Articles about her foundation for musical education in underserved communities. Photos of her at charity events. And most recently, a feature in a music education journal about her work with the Symphony of Hope program in Providence, Rhode Island. She looked different now. Her once-long dark hair was cut in a stylish bob with strands of silver she hadn't bothered to hide. Laugh lines framed her eyes that still held the same warmth he remembered. Her smile, that was exactly as he remembered it. What would it be like to see that smile directed at him again, after all this time? After everything he'd done? Elijah clicked on a video interview. Her voice filled his silent office, and something long dormant stirred within him. Music saved my life, she was saying to the interviewer. That's why I believe every child deserves the chance to find their voice. When a child who's never been heard suddenly creates something beautiful, that moment changes everything. The interviewer nodded. Your Symphony of Hope program has helped thousands of children across New England. What inspired you to start it? Adele paused, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. Sometimes our greatest failures lead us to our purpose. I lost something precious once, but in that loss, I found a way to create something meaningful. Elijah closed the laptop, unable to watch more. Loss. Something precious. The words cut through him like glass. Was she talking about their relationship or something else entirely? He moved to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. The city lights blurred below him, millions of lives interconnected while he stood alone in his tower of success. How many connections had he severed in his relentless climb to the top? Without conscious thought, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in over a decade. Marcus, it's Elijah. His voice sounded strange even to his own ears. I need the jet ready tonight. Tonight? Marcus, his head of operations, couldn't hide his surprise. Where to? Providence, Rhode Island. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Marcus had been with him since the beginning, since the days when Resonance was just 3 programmers in a garage. He knew everything about Elijah, including the relationship he'd ended when success first beckoned. Providence? Marcus repeated carefully. Is everything all right? I don't know, Elijah answered truthfully, but I need to find out. If you believe relationships matter more than riches, hit that like button right now. And if you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, why not? Join us by subscribing and share this story so someone else remembers what truly matters. Comment family first, if you agree. 3 hours later, Elijah stood in a luxury hotel suite in downtown Providence, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion pressing on him. What was he doing here? What did he expect to accomplish by showing up unannounced after 11 years of silence? Would she even agree to see him, or would she slam the door in his face? A response he would certainly deserve. Morning found him walking the unfamiliar streets, his usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic uncertainty. He'd researched the Symphony of Hope Center. It occupied what had once been an abandoned theater in the Arts District. The brick building was unassuming from the outside, restored but not ostentatious. A simple wooden sign hung above the entrance. Symphony of Hope Center, where every child finds their voice. Elijah stood across the street, watching as children and teenagers entered with instrument cases and backpacks. Each face alive with purpose, with belonging. The opposite of the empty expressions he saw in boardroom mirrors. What would it feel like to create something that brought such obvious joy? Something that transformed lives rather than just bank accounts? Finally, gathering his courage, he crossed the street and pulled open the heavy wooden door. Inside, he was immediately enveloped by the sounds of music. A violin being tuned in one room, a chorus of young voices from another, the rhythmic beat of drums from somewhere deeper in the building. The reception area was warm and inviting, with comfortable seating and walls covered in student artwork and musical notation. At the desk, a young woman with bright blue hair looked up from her computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, her smile genuine but professional. "I'm looking for Adele Alloway. Do you have an appointment? Miss Alloway is usually fully booked with students and staff meetings." "No, Elijah faltered. What was he doing here? "I'm an old friend. I was hoping to surprise her." The receptionist looked skeptical. "Your name?" "Elijah Winters." Her eyes widened slightly in recognition. "The tech guy? From Resonance?" He nodded, uncomfortable with being identified. "Wait here, please." She disappeared down a hallway, leaving Elijah standing awkwardly in the reception area. Children and teenagers moved through the space, instrument cases in hand. Sheet music clutched to chest. They paid him no attention, wrapped up in their own worlds of creation. A boy of about 14 sat in a corner, headphones on, fingers tapping rhythms on his knees, completely lost in whatever he was hearing. The music. That was what had first drawn him to Adele 11 years ago. Her passion for it, the way she could close her eyes and disappear into sound in a way he had never experienced. Music for him had always been a product, a commodity to be packaged and sold. For her, it was life itself. Would she still have that same passion, or had time and experience changed her as much as it had changed him? Elijah. The voice behind him stopped his heart. He turned slowly. Adele stood at the entrance to a hallway, her expression unreadable. She wore simple black pants and a deep blue blouse, a stark contrast to the formal business attire he'd always seen her in during their time together. A lanyard with an ID badge hung around her neck. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was controlled, neither hostile nor welcoming. For the first time in years, words failed the man who could persuade investors to part with millions in a single meeting. "I saw you in an interview. Your work here." She studied him, arms crossed. "You flew across the country because you saw an interview?" "I needed to see you." Adele glanced at the children passing through the reception area, then back at him. "Not here. My office." She turned without waiting for a response, expecting him to follow. Her office was small but warm, bookshelves filled with music theory texts, awards, and thank you cards from students pinned to a corkboard, a baby grand piano in the corner, Through a window, he could see a courtyard where students gathered between lessons. Adele closed the door and turned to face him. "It's been 11 years, Elijah. Why now?" There was no accusation in her tone, just genuine curiosity. Somehow that made it worse. "I don't know," he admitted. "I was sitting in my office last night, surrounded by everything I've worked for, and I felt nothing. Then I saw you talking about your foundation, about music saving lives, and something broke open inside me." She leaned against her desk. "So this is about you feeling empty? Thinking a trip down memory lane might fill whatever void you're experiencing?" "No," he shook his head. "Maybe, I don't know." A knock at the door interrupted them. The blue-haired receptionist poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Alloway, but Zoe's here for her lesson. Tell her I'll be just a minute, Tara." After the door closed, Adele sighed. "I have students all day. Whatever crisis of meaning you're having, I can't help you with it." "Have dinner with me," Elijah said impulsively. "Just dinner. To talk." She hesitated, studying him with those perceptive eyes that had always seen through his carefully constructed facades. "Fine. Dinner. 7:30. There's a restaurant called Meridian on Benefit Street." She moved to the door. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a student waiting to work on her college audition pieces." As he turned to leave, a photograph on her desk caught his eye. Adele with a girl who looked about 10 years old, both laughing as they sat at a piano. The girl had Adele's smile, her expressive eyes, but something about the shape of her face, the set of her jaw. Elijah felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "Adele," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Who is that?" Adele followed his gaze to the photograph, her expression shuddering closed. "My daughter, Zoe. How old is she?" "She'll be 11 next month." The mathematics were immediate and devastating. 11 years. We broke up 11 years ago. Adele's hand tightened on the doorknob. "We have a student waiting, Mr. Winters. 7:30 at Meridian. Don't be late." As the door closed behind him, Elijah stood motionless in the hallway, his mind reeling. A daughter. He had a daughter he never knew existed. A child who had been growing, learning, living for a decade while he built his empire of technology and wealth. What else had he missed while chasing success? Elijah spent the day wandering the streets of Providence in a daze. 11 years ago, he had ended his relationship with Adele when Resonance received its first major round of funding. The company was taking off, requiring all his time, all his focus. And Adele, with her dreams of using music for social change rather than profit, had become an inconvenient distraction. "I can't do this anymore," he told her in the sterile conference room of his first real office. "The company needs my complete attention. There's just no room for complications." Adele, always perceptive, had seen through him immediately. "I'm a complication now? Last month you called me your inspiration. You know what I mean. Resonance is at a critical juncture. The investors—" "Say what you really mean, Elijah," she had interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "You're choosing the company over us, over what we could be together." He hadn't denied it. The truth was, relationships required vulnerability, and vulnerability was a liability in the cutthroat world he was determined to conquer. Better to make a clean break now than to drag it out. "You'll thank me someday," he'd said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "We want different things. You want to change the world through music education. I want to build something revolutionary in the industry." "They're not mutually exclusive," she'd responded, gathering her things. "But I won't beg you to see that. Goodbye, Elijah." She'd walked out and he'd let her go, convinced he'd made the rational choice, the right choice for his future. Now, as he sat on a bench overlooking the Providence River, watching the sunset paint the water gold, the magnitude of what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away, crashed over him. A daughter, a child he'd never known existed, a child who would be turning 11 next month, a child who had Adele's smile and his jawline. How many birthdays had he missed? How many first steps, first words, first days of school? All the milestones parents treasure, gone forever because he'd been too focused on quarterly reports and market share to even take Adele's calls. By the time he arrived at Meridian, Elijah was no longer the confident CEO whose mere presence commanded attention. He was a man confronting the greatest failure of his life, a failure that couldn't be fixed with money or strategic planning. Adele was already seated at a corner table, her expression guarded as he approached. "You're here," she said, sounding mildly surprised. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" She lifted one shoulder in a slight shrug. "You disappeared once before without looking back. It seemed within character." The waiter appeared, saving him from having to respond immediately. They ordered drinks, sparkling water for her, bourbon for him. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked after the waiter left, unable to contain the question any longer. Adele met his gaze directly. "I tried to tell you. 3 times, in fact. The first time, your assistant said you were in meetings all day. The second time, you were in Tokyo for 2 weeks. The third time, I got through to you on the phone, and you said, and I quote, 'Adele, we've said everything there is to say. Please don't contact me again. It's better this way.'" Each word was a blow. He remembered that call, remembered dismissing her attempt to speak as emotional backsliding. He'd been in the middle of negotiations with a major record label. "After that," she continued, "I decided our daughter deserved better than a father who had to be convinced to care. So I stopped trying." "Our daughter," he repeated, the words foreign on his tongue. "Zoe. Yes, Zoe Catherine Alloway. She's brilliant, stubborn, and has your infuriating ability to learn anything almost instantly. She plays 4 instruments, with piano being her strongest. She loves math, hates green vegetables, and has your exact same frown when she's concentrating." Each detail hit Elijah like a physical blow. 10 years of moments gone. First words, first steps, first days of school. All the milestones he hadn't even known to miss. "Does she know about me?" Adele sipped her water before answering. "She knows her father is someone I loved once, who wasn't ready to be a parent. She knows he's successful in the tech world. As she's gotten older, she's asked more questions. I've never lied to her, but I've also never pushed her to connect with someone who made it clear they didn't want connections." "I didn't know," Elijah said, his voice hoarse. "If I had known, would it have changed anything?" Adele interrupted, her tone gentle but challenging. 11 years ago, you chose your company over us when it was just me. Would adding a baby to the equation have changed your priorities?" The question hung between them, unanswerable, because they both knew the truth. The man he had been then, driven, ruthlessly focused, emotionally detached, would have seen a child as an even greater complication. Their food arrived, but neither had much appetite. Elijah pushed his salmon around his plate, trying to process everything. The weight of his choices pressed down on him with each passing moment. 10 years of his daughter's life, gone forever. No amount of money or power could buy back that time. "I'd like to meet her," he finally said. Adele set down her fork. "Why? What do you hope to accomplish?" "She's my daughter. I've missed 10 years of her life already. I don't want to miss any more." "And what happens when you go back to New York? Back to your company and your life there?" "Zoe isn't a quarterly project you can check in on when it's convenient." The words stung because they contained truth. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't have a plan or a strategy for this, but I know I want to try, need to try." Adele studied him, searching for something in his face. Whatever she saw made her sigh. "I won't stop you from meeting her. She has the right to know you, if that's what she wants. But I need to prepare her first, and Elijah," her expression turned fierce, maternal, "if you come into her life, you stay in her life. No disappearing when it gets difficult or inconvenient. She deserves consistency and commitment." "I understand. Do you? Because your track record suggests otherwise." Elijah reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of hers. "I'm not the same person I was 11 years ago. Or at least I don't want to be that person anymore." For the first time that evening, Adele's expression softened into something like sympathy. "People do change. I hope for Zoe's sake that you have." She glanced at her watch. "I should get home. I told my babysitter I'd be back by 9. When can I meet her?" "Give me a few days to talk to her, see how she feels about it." Adele hesitated, then added, "She has a recital on Saturday, at the center. 2 If you're still in town, and if she's comfortable with it, that might be a good opportunity." "I'll be there," he promised. "And Adele, thank you for building such an amazing life for her, for the work you're doing with all those children. It's extraordinary." She smiled, a real smile that reminded him of everything he'd walked away from. Good night, Elijah. He watched her drive away, standing alone on the sidewalk, long after her car disappeared from view. Have you ever faced a moment when you realized the true cost of your ambition? When the success you chased revealed itself to be hollow compared to the connections you sacrificed? If you've ever faced a tough choice between career and love, comment your experience. And to everyone watching, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you don't miss stories that hit this deeply. Like and share. If this moment shook you like it shook Elijah, the days until Saturday stretched before Elijah like an eternity. He canceled meetings, delegated decisions, ignored concerned messages from his executive team. For the first time in his adult life, his company wasn't his primary focus. Instead, he found himself researching child development, reading articles about father-daughter relationships, even watching videos about how to connect with preteens. Would she like him? Would she resent him? What if she refused to meet him altogether? The question circled in his mind, keeping him awake at night. By Saturday morning, Elijah was a bundle of nerves, a foreign sensation for a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms with unwavering confidence. He arrived at the Symphony of Hope Center 30 minutes early, a small wrapped package tucked under his arm. He'd spent hours selecting it, a digital music composition tablet, top of the line but not ostentatiously expensive. He didn't want to appear to be buying her affection, yet he wanted to give her something meaningful. The Symphony of Hope Center hummed with energy, parents clutching bouquets, grandparents with cameras at the ready, siblings alternating between boredom and pride, all the familiar trappings of a student recital. He spotted Adele near the entrance to the performance hall, elegant in a simple dress, directing volunteers and calming nervous students. She saw him and made her way over. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She nodded, then lowered her voice. "I talked with Zoe. She knows you're here. She's nervous but curious. She's playing third in the program, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." Elijah's chest tightened. "That was your favorite piece in college. She chose it herself." Adele hesitated. "She agreed to meet you briefly after the recital, just for a few minutes. I told her it was entirely her choice, and she can change her mind at any point." "Thank you," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. The recital hall was intimate, with seating for perhaps 100 people. Elijah found a spot near the back, not wanting to distract Zoe during her performance. The program began with a young violinist, followed by a cellist. Then a small figure in a blue dress approached the piano. Zoe, his daughter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her posture perfect as she settled on the bench. She adjusted the microphone, then spoke with surprising poise for a child her age. "Good afternoon. I'm Zoe Alloway, and I'll be performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. Then she began to play, and Elijah forgot to breathe. Her technique was impressive for her age, but it was the emotion in her playing that struck him most. She played with a sensitivity that belied her years, each note weighted with intention. As her fingers danced over the keys, Elijah saw in her the perfect blend of himself and Adele, his precision and her soul. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Elijah found himself on his feet, tears streaming unchecked down his face. This extraordinary person, this blend of artistry and intelligence, was his child. A child he had never known existed until days ago. In that moment, success was redefined for him. Not in stock prices or market share, but in the creation of something truly miraculous. A human being with boundless potential, and he had nearly missed it entirely. The rest of the recital passed in a blur. Afterward, as parents and children mingled in the reception area, Adele appeared at his side. "She's ready to meet you," she said quietly. "In my office, just for a few minutes." Elijah followed her, his heart pounding. When they entered the office, Zoe was sitting on the piano bench, still in her recital dress, swinging her legs nervously. She looked up as they entered, her eyes, so like his own, widening slightly. "Zoe," Adele said gently, "this is Elijah Winters, your father." "Hello, Zoe," Elijah said, his voice rough with emotion. "Your performance was beautiful. You play with remarkable feeling." "Thanks," she replied, studying him with open curiosity. "Mom says you run a big music company." "I do. It's called Resonance Technologies." She nodded. "I know. I Googled you after Mom told me you were coming. You're worth $8.3 billion. Despite everything, Elijah laughed. You shouldn't believe everything you read online. But yes, the company has been successful. Why didn't you want to know me before? The question came without warning, direct and unflinching. Elijah glanced at Adele, who gave him a look that clearly said this was his to answer. I didn't know about you, he said carefully, but that's not a good enough excuse. I should have stayed in touch with your mother. I should have been there from the beginning. He moved closer, kneeling to meet her at eye level. I made a terrible mistake, Zoe, and I've missed so much because of it. Zoe considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. Do you play any instruments? The question surprised him. Piano, not nearly as well as you, and I haven't played in years. Mom says music reveals who people really are. That's why she wanted me to meet you after my recital, so you could hear me play and I could see your reaction. Out of the corner of his eye, Elijah saw Adele smile. Your mother is very wise, he said, and she's right. When I heard you play, I saw both of us in you. My focus, her heart. Zoe seemed satisfied with this answer. Are you staying in Providence? I don't know yet, Elijah answered honestly. I'd like to get to know you if you're willing. That might mean I need to make some changes in my life. She studied him, then nodded once, decisively. You can stay for ice cream if Mom says it's okay. There's always ice cream after recitals. Adele nodded. Ice cream is fine. Zoe stood, smoothing her dress. I should go thank Mrs. Diaz for turning my pages, but I'll see you at ice cream. She moved to the door, then turned back. You look like your pictures, except sadder. After she left, silence settled between Elijah and Adele. She's remarkable, Elijah said finally. She is, Adele agreed, and perceptive, like you always were. I've been thinking about what comes next, about how I can be part of her life in a meaningful way. And I think it's time for Resonance to have satellite offices. Providence seems like a good location for our educational outreach division. Adele's expression was skeptical. You'd relocate your company for a child you just met? Not the entire company. Just create a reason to be here regularly, to be present in her life if she wants that. And what about in 3 months or 6 when the novelty wears off? When the day-to-day reality of being a parent isn't exciting or new anymore? Elijah reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. I've spent 11 years chasing success by every conventional measure. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, more professional recognition than I ever dreamed of. And none of it means anything compared to what I felt watching our daughter play Chopin today. Adele's eyes glistened. She worked so hard on that piece, practiced for months. I want to hear her practice. I want to be there for the wrong notes and the frustration, not just the polished performances. I want to know her, Adele, all of her. That's what being a parent is, she said softly. Being there for all of it, the beautiful moments and the hard ones. I'm ready for that now, or at least I want to try. Adele squeezed his hand briefly before releasing it. Let's start with ice cream, one step at a time. Sometimes the most profound journeys begin with the smallest steps. For Elijah, that first step was sitting in an ice cream parlor with his daughter, watching her deliberate between chocolate chip and rocky road with the same intensity he once applied to million-dollar decisions. In the weeks that followed, Elijah created a new rhythm to his life, one centered around Providence rather than Manhattan. He rented a modest apartment downtown, close to the Symphony of Hope Center. 3 days a week, he worked remotely, taking video calls and reviewing reports. The other 4 days belonged to Zoe, if she wanted them. At first, their interactions were tentative, awkward. They met for ice cream again, visited the planetarium, walked along the waterfront. Conversations started and stopped, neither quite knowing how to bridge the decade-long gap between them. Do you have other children? Zoe asked one afternoon as they sat on a park bench, watching ducks glide across a pond. No, Elijah replied, just you. Did you ever want children? Before you knew about me, I mean. The question pierced him. I never thought about it, he admitted. I was so focused on building my company that I didn't consider what I might be missing. Zoe nodded, processing this. Mom says your company helps people listen to music anywhere they want. That's right. Resonance created technology that lets people stream high-quality music on any device, anywhere in the world. But it doesn't help them make music, she observed. Just listen to it. Her insight startled him. You're right. We focused on consumption rather than creation. Mom says making music changes people from the inside. That's why she started Symphony of Hope. Elijah studied his daughter's profile. So serious, so thoughtful. Your mom is very wise. She cried sometimes, Zoe said suddenly, her eyes still on the pond. At night, when she thought I was asleep, when I was little. The words landed like a physical blow. Elijah swallowed hard. I'm sorry I caused her pain, caused both of you pain. She's happier now, Zoe said with a child's pragmatic acceptance. And she says what matters is what we do next, not what we did before. She told you that? About you, Zoe confirmed. When she said you wanted to meet me, something warm unfurled in Elijah's chest. Gratitude for Adele's generosity in how she'd presented him to their daughter, despite everything. We all make choices that seem right in the moment, only to discover years later the true cost of our decisions. What matters isn't the mistakes we've made, but how we choose to make amends. If this scene touched you, hit like right now. And if you're still watching but not subscribed, why deny yourself stories that remind you of forgiveness and second chances? Subscribe, share this with someone who needs healing, and comment, I choose forgiveness. After a month of these careful exchanges, something shifted. Zoe began to open up, revealing herself in small glimpses. She showed him her composition notebook, filled with half-finished melodies and musical ideas. She asked about his childhood, about how he'd learned to code, about why he'd started Resonance, and Elijah found himself sharing stories he'd never told anyone. About growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about teaching himself programming from library books because they couldn't afford a computer, about the night in college when he'd heard Adele playing piano in a practice room and had been unable to walk away. You loved her, Zoe said with the directness of a child. Yes, Elijah admitted. Very much. Do you still? He hesitated, caught between honesty and prudence. Your mother is one of the most remarkable people I've ever known. I admire her enormously. Zoe rolled her eyes. That's not what I asked. Elijah laughed, recognizing his own stubborn persistence in her. It's complicated, Zoe. When adults hurt each other, even if they still care for one another, it takes time to rebuild trust. Like when Emma Sullivan told everyone I couldn't really play Chopin, and then wanted to be friends again. Mom said I could forgive her, but should take my time trusting her again. Exactly like that, Elijah agreed, marveling at how easily she translated complex adult dynamics into her own experience. As summer faded into fall, Elijah found himself increasingly involved not just in Zoe's life, but in the work of the Symphony of Hope. It began with small contributions, fixing the outdated sound system, upgrading the computers in the lab, then larger ones, funding scholarships for students who couldn't afford lessons, purchasing new instruments to replace the worn-out loaners. You don't have to buy your way in, Adele told him one evening after the students had gone home. Zoe's warming up to you because of the time you're spending with her, not because of what you can provide. I know, Elijah said. This isn't about Zoe, or not only about her, it's about realizing you were right all along. Music education changes lives. I can see it in every child who comes through these doors. Adele studied him, searching for signs of insincerity and finding none. The Elijah Winters I knew 11 years ago would never have admitted someone else was right. The Elijah Winters you knew 11 years ago was an idiot, he replied, making her laugh. They began to work together, tentatively at first, then with increasing comfort. Elijah's business acumen complemented Adele's artistic vision. He helped her secure grants, streamline operations, plan for expansion. She helped him rediscover the joy in music, the purpose in creation rather than consumption. One evening after a particularly successful fundraiser that would allow Symphony of Hope to open a second location in South Providence, Elijah found Adele in her office, surrounded by grant applications and budget projections. We did it, he said, loosening his tie as he collapsed into the chair opposite her desk. The new center can open by spring. Adele smiled, fatigue and triumph mingling in her expression. We did, though I'm still not sure how you convinced Mrs. Whitcomb to double her donation. I simply pointed out that her grandchildren would benefit from having music education in their neighborhood schools and that matching funds would create a legacy with her name on it. Clever. Adele stretched, rolling her shoulders to release tension. Zoe told me you're teaching her to code. Elijah nodded. She wanted to create an app that helps beginning music students practice more effectively. She has remarkable ideas. She's always been full of them. Even as a toddler, she was constantly combining things in unexpected ways. I wish I'd known her then, Elijah said quietly. Adele's expression softened. I know. For what it's worth, I do regret not trying harder to tell you. After my third attempt, pride took over. I decided if you couldn't be bothered to take my call, you didn't deserve to know. You had every right to feel that way. Perhaps, but my feelings weren't what mattered most. Zoe's needs should have come first. Elijah shook his head. You've done an extraordinary job raising her, Adele. She's thoughtful, kind, brilliant, everything a parent could hope for in a child. You put her needs first in every way that counted. Their eyes met across the desk, a current of understanding passing between them. So much had changed in the months since his impulsive flight to Providence. The awkwardness had gradually given way to a cautious friendship, then to something warmer, a partnership born of shared purpose and shared love for their daughter. You've changed, Adele said softly. The man I knew before would never have walked away from his company the way you have these past months. I haven't walked away, Elijah corrected. I've reprioritized. The company still matters to me, but not more than Zoe. Not more than... He hesitated. Then what? Adele prompted. Then the possibility of becoming someone I can be proud of. Someone worthy of being her father, and worthy of your forgiveness. Adele stood, moving around the desk to sit on its edge, closer to him. I forgave you months ago, Elijah, when I saw how genuinely you wanted to know our daughter. When I saw you listening to her, really listening, in a way you never quite managed with anyone before. Including you, he acknowledged. I was so focused on my vision, my goals, that I never truly heard yours. Never understood that they weren't incompatible with mine, just different. And now? Now I understand that success without meaning is just noise. What you've built here, what you're giving these children, what you gave Zoe, that's the kind of legacy that matters. Adele reached out, her fingers lightly touching his. It's not too late, you know, to build something meaningful together. The touch was electric, familiar yet new. Elijah turned his hand, entwining their fingers. As business partners, you mean? A smile played at the corners of her mouth. That too. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. But before either could speak further, a knock at the door broke the spell. Adele withdrew her hand as the door opened to reveal one of the music teachers with a question about the upcoming winter concert. As their partnership deepened, both professionally and personally, Elijah noticed something curious. Whenever he asked Adele about the symphony's major donors, she became evasive. At first, he attributed it to professional discretion. Many philanthropists preferred anonymity. But as he grew more involved with the financial side of the organization, the pattern became impossible to ignore. One particular donor, listed only as MW Foundation in the records, had contributed substantial sums annually since the symphony's inception. Unlike other donors who earmarked their gifts for specific programs or equipment, MW's donations came with only one stipulation. They must be used where most needed. Who is MW? Elijah asked one afternoon, reviewing the annual reports. They've given more than any other single donor, but there's no recognition plaque, no name scholarship. Adele busied herself with organizing papers on her desk, not meeting his eyes. Some people prefer to remain anonymous. Of course, but as we're planning expansion, we should reach out to our most loyal supporters. Perhaps MW would be interested in naming rights for the new building? They wouldn't be, Adele said quickly. Too quickly. Elijah set down the report, studying her. You know them personally? It wasn't a question. After months of relearning each other, he could read her discomfort like sheet music. Adele sighed, finally meeting his gaze. Yes. And? And it's complicated. She rubbed her temples, clearly conflicted. I promised confidentiality. Since when do we keep secrets from each other? The question slipped out before he could stop it, presumptuous in its implication of intimacy. Adele's eyebrow arched. You mean besides the decade you spent not knowing your own daughter existed? Elijah winced. Fair point. I'm sorry. She softened immediately. That was uncalled for. It's just This particular situation requires delicacy. Is something illegal happening? Are the donations coming from a questionable source? No, nothing like that. The donor is someone from your past. Elijah frowned. From my past? A business associate? Former investor? Adele took a deep breath. MW stands for Marion Winters. The name hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't spoken it aloud in 20 years. My mother, he said flatly. You're telling me my mother has been funding your foundation all these years? Adele nodded, her expression gentle but firm. Since the beginning. That's impossible. She couldn't afford donations of this size. She made some wise investments and lives very modestly. Elijah stood abruptly, pacing the small office. How? How did you even meet her? At a music education conference in Boston 5 years ago, I was presenting a workshop on accessible music pedagogy. She attended and introduced herself afterward. Adele paused. She recognized my name from when we were together. And you never thought to tell me this? His voice rose with disbelief. That you've been in contact with my estranged mother for 5 years? When exactly should I have told you? Elijah, during the 11 years you were completely absent from my life? Or perhaps the moment you appeared unannounced at my door after a decade of silence? The edge in her voice was justified, but she softened it with a sigh. I promised her I wouldn't tell you. She didn't want to complicate my life or intrude on yours. Elijah ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process this revelation. So all this time, while I thought she was... I don't even know what I thought. I cut her out of my life so completely I didn't allow myself to think about her at all. She's followed your career with tremendous pride, Adele said quietly. Every article, every award, every innovation. She's collected them all. Why? The question burst from him, raw and confused. Why would she care after what I did? Because she's your mother. Because love doesn't stop, even when it's rejected. Adele stood, moving closer to him. The donations to Symphony of Hope were her way of staying connected to you, however distantly. She said once that supporting music education felt like honoring the part of you she'd helped nurture before you walked away. Elijah sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. Where is she? Is she still in Boston? No, she moved to Providence 3 years ago, to be closer to the foundation and to Zoe. His head snapped up. She knows about Zoe? Adele nodded. They've met several times. Zoe doesn't know she's her grandmother, though. I introduced Marion as a friend and supporter of the program. This is... Elijah struggled for words, anger, and confusion, warring with a deeper emotion he couldn't name. This is unbelievable. A conspiracy behind my back. It wasn't a conspiracy, Elijah. It was respecting the boundaries you created when you cut her out of your life, and protecting Zoe from being caught in the middle of family wounds she didn't create. Does she know I'm here now? That I've been spending time with Zoe? Yes. Adele's voice was gentle. I told her when you first arrived. She was happy for Zoe, for both of you. Elijah stood again, unable to remain still with so many emotions churning inside him. I need to process this. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. Why are you telling me now? Adele's expression was a mixture of resolve and compassion. Because you've shown me you're capable of facing difficult truths, because Zoe deserves to know her grandmother, and because Marion is ill, Elijah. She has been for some time. The floor seemed to shift beneath his feet. Ill? How ill? Stage 3 lymphoma. She's responding well to treatment, but... Adele let the implication hang in the air. Elijah gripped the doorframe, suddenly unsteady. Where is she? I need to see her. Are you sure? This isn't something to rush into if you're not prepared to follow through. She's already lost you once. His jaw tightened. I'm not the same person who walked away 20 years ago. I believe that, Adele said quietly. But does she have reason to? The question lingered in the air between them, challenging and honest. I don't know, Elijah admitted, but I need to try. How many of us carry the weight of broken relationships, thinking it's too late to mend what's been shattered? Sometimes the hardest person to forgive isn't someone else, it's ourselves. If you believe time with loved ones should never be wasted, like this video. And if you've watched this far without subscribing, subscribe now. This channel exists to remind you of what truly matters. Comment a heart emoji and share this to remind someone to reach out today. Driving through the modest neighborhoods of East Providence, Elijah fought to control the memories flooding back. Growing up in apartments not unlike these, small, practical spaces his mother had always managed to make feel like home, despite their financial struggles. The upright piano that had occupied one entire wall of their living room, the instrument Marion had taught on to supplement her income as a school music teacher. He remembered the sacrifices she'd made, the second and third jobs, the clothes she mended instead of replaced, the vacations they never took. All so he could have opportunities she'd never had. Private school when his academic gifts became apparent, computer programming camps, college without crushing debt. And how had he repaid her? By systematically erasing every trace of his humble beginnings once success came within reach. The final argument played in his mind with painful clarity. His first major investment deal had just closed, and he'd bought an expensive condo in a trendy neighborhood. When his mother visited, her pride in his success had been evident, but so had her concern. All this focus on money and status, she'd said, looking around at his sleek, impersonal furnishings. This isn't how I raised you, Elijah. That's the point, he'd snapped. I'm not living in the world you raised me for. I'm building something bigger than either of us could have imagined. At what cost? She'd asked. You never call. You've broken things off with Adele who was good for you. You work 100-hour weeks. Success doesn't have to mean isolation. I don't need life advice from someone who spent her entire career teaching other people's children for minimum wage. He'd retorted, the words cruel and calculated. I'm reinventing myself, and there's no room for reminders of where I came from. The hurt in her eyes had been devastating, but he'd hardened himself against it. Vulnerability was weakness, and he couldn't afford weakness when he was so close to everything he'd worked for. I'll always be proud of you, she'd said quietly, gathering her coat. And I'll always love you, no matter how far you go or how much you change. That door will always be open. Don't wait by it, he'd replied coldly. I'm not looking back. That had been 20 years ago. She'd tried to contact him multiple times in the months that followed. Calls he ignored, letters he returned unopened, gifts he refused to accept. Eventually, the attempts had stopped, and he'd told himself it was better this way. Cleaner, less complicated. Now pulling up to the small, well-kept bungalow on a tree-lined street, Elijah felt the full weight of his cruelty. His mother had spent 2 decades watching his success from afar, collecting articles about his achievements, even supporting his former girlfriend's foundation, all while he pretended she didn't exist. He sat in the car for long minutes, gathering his courage. Finally, he approached the front door and knocked, his heart hammering against his ribs. The door opened, and there she was. Marion Winters had aged, of course. Her once dark hair was now silver, elegantly styled in a short cut that framed her face. She'd always been slender, but now there was a fragility to her that spoke of illness fought with dignity. Yet her eyes, the same green as his own, as Zoe's, were as sharp and perceptive as ever. Those eyes widened in shock, then filled with an emotion too complex to name. Elijah, she said, her voice exactly as he remembered it. I didn't expect to see you here. Hello, Mother. The formal word felt strange on his tongue after so many years. May I come in? She hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Of course. The living room was modest but comfortable, with bookshelves lining one wall and a baby grand piano occupying the bay window area. Photos were displayed on the piano. Elijah recognized Zoe in several, smiling with his mother at what appeared to be recitals and informal gatherings. You have a lovely home, he said, feeling utterly inadequate. Thank you. Marion gestured to a chair. Please sit. Can I offer you something to drink? Tea, perhaps? No, thank you. He remained standing, too restless to sit. Adele told me about your donations to Symphony of Hope, about your illness. Marion moved to the piano bench, sitting with the straight-back posture of a lifelong musician. I see. And that's why you're here? Out of obligation because I'm ill? No, yes, I don't know. Elijah ran a hand through his hair. I've been in Providence for months, getting to know Zoe, working with Adele, and all this time you were here and I had no idea. I asked Adele not to tell you. Marion's voice was calm, matter of fact. You made your wishes very clear 20 years ago. I've respected that boundary. By secretly funding my ex-girlfriend's foundation? By meeting my daughter without telling me? A flash of steel appeared in Marion's eyes. I donated to Symphony of Hope because I believe in its mission, because music education matters, and yes, because it was founded by someone you once cared about. It was the closest I could come to supporting something that mattered to you without intruding on your life. She paused, then continued more gently. As for Zoe, I met her as a student in the program before I knew who she was. The resemblance was striking. When Adele realized I was your mother, she was torn. But I asked her not to burden Zoe with complicated family history she was too young to understand. Elijah paced the small room, struggling with conflicting emotions. So you've been what? Watching my life from a distance? Collecting news clippings? Showing up at my daughter's recitals? Is that so terrible? Marion asked quietly. To care about a child who wants nothing to do with you? To take pride in his accomplishments even when he shut you out? She stood, moving to a small desk where she opened a drawer and withdrew a leather-bound album. Yes, I've followed your career. I've celebrated every milestone, mourned every setback. From afar, as you wished. Is that a crime? She handed him the album. Inside were carefully preserved articles, photos, printouts of web pages, a methodical chronicle of his rise from unknown startup founder to tech industry titan. 2 decades of his life seen through his mother's eyes. Why? He asked, his voice hoarse. Why bother after what I said to you? After how I treated you? Marion's smile was sad but genuine. Because that's what mothers do, Elijah. We love our children even when they reject us. We hope they'll find their way back eventually. And if they don't, she shrugged slightly, we love them anyway. Something broke open inside him, a dam he'd built 20 years ago, now crumbling under the weight of too many emotions. He sank onto the sofa, the album clutched in his hands. I thought it would be easier, he admitted, his voice barely audible, to cut ties completely, to reinvent myself without reminders of where I came from. Of the struggles, the poverty, the limitations. Easier than what? Than allowing yourself to be loved? Marion shook her head. Roots aren't limitations, Elijah. They're what keep us grounded when success tries to sweep us away. I know that now, he said, or I'm learning it. Through Zoe, through reconnecting with Adele. I'm glad, and she truly seemed to be, despite everything. They're remarkable, both of them. You're fortunate they're giving you a second chance. More fortunate than I deserve. Elijah looked up, meeting her eyes directly. Adele said you're ill. Lymphoma? Marion nodded. Stage 3. The treatments are going well, though. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. Are you in pain? Do you have help? Is there anything you need? A small, sad smile touched her lips. Concerned now. After all this time? The words stung, but they were fair. Yes, he said simply. I am. Marion studied him, searching for sincerity. I manage. Friends help when needed. The symphony community has been wonderful. Let me help, Elijah said, the words rushing out before he could reconsider. Let me be part of your treatment, your recovery. I have resources, connections to the best specialists. I don't need your money, Elijah. Her tone was firm but not unkind. I've built a good life, made sound investments. I don't want a sudden flood of guilty generosity. Then what do you want? He asked, suddenly desperate to make amends, but unsure how. Marion's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. I want my son back, not his money or his influence, just him. If he still exists somewhere inside the man you've become. The silence that followed was heavy with 2 decades of absence. Elijah stared at the album in his hands, at the careful documentation of a life his mother had only been allowed to witness from afar. I don't know if that person still exists, he finally said. I've spent so long being someone else. I see glimpses of him, Marion replied, in how you look at Zoe, in how you speak about Adele, in the fact that you're sitting in my living room right now despite everything. I want to try, Elijah said, to find my way back, not just for Zoe or for Adele, for myself, and for you, if you'll let me. Marion's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I'd like that very much. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall he'd built between his past and present, between the person he'd been raised to be and the person he'd become. As he prepared to leave, Marion walked him to the door. "Zoe has a lesson with me tomorrow afternoon," she said casually. "Perhaps you'd like to join us. See how we work together?" The invitation was a gift, a small opening into the relationship his mother had built with his daughter while he was absent. "I'd like that," Elijah said. "Thank you," Marion nodded. 4 o'clock. Don't be late. Zoe is very punctual." "Like her grandmother," Elijah observed, a faint smile touching his lips. "And her father," Marion added, "when he chooses to be." The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of reconnection. Elijah and Marion moved cautiously around each other, rediscovering rhythms lost to 2 decades of silence. Their conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes painful, but gradually warmed with tentative forgiveness. Adele became the unexpected bridge between them, the neutral territory where their wounded relationship could begin to heal. Through her gentle mediation, mother and son found ways to speak the truths that needed speaking without retreating to old patterns of hurt. "You built an empire by understanding what people want," Adele told Elijah privately after one particularly difficult conversation. "But you never bothered to understand what your mother needed from you. It wasn't status or money or power, just acknowledgement, recognition of her place in your story." "I know that now," Elijah admitted. "I was so determined to escape my past, I didn't realize I was rejecting the best part of it." The true catalyst for healing, however, was Zoe. When Adele and Elijah finally told her that Marion was her grandmother, her reaction was unfiltered delight. "Mrs. Winters is my grandmother?" Her eyes had widened in amazement. "But I've known her for years. She comes to all my recitals." "She didn't want to complicate things," Adele explained gently, "until your father and I decided how to explain everything." "This is amazing," Zoe exclaimed, already planning. "We have to have dinner together. All of us. A real family dinner." And so they did. In Marion's small dining room, 3 generations gathered around a table for the first time. The conversation was stilted at first, with too much history weighing on the adults. But Zoe's natural enthusiasm gradually melted the tension. "Can you teach me that finger technique you were showing me last month?" she asked Marion over dessert. "For the Beethoven sonata?" "Of course, dear," Marion smiled. "Perhaps your father would like to learn it too. He always struggled with that particular stretch when he was studying piano." "You played?" Zoe turned to Elijah, surprised. "You said you haven't played in years." "Not seriously since college," Elijah admitted. "But before that, I played quite a lot." "He was quite talented," Marion added, "when he applied himself." "Would you play something?" Zoe asked, looking between them. "Both of you? Together?" The request hung in the air, loaded with significance beyond a simple musical performance. Elijah glanced at his mother, unsure. "I'm very out of practice," he hedged. "So am I these days," Marion admitted. "The treatments affect my coordination sometimes." "Please," Zoe persisted. "Just something simple?" Adele watched silently, sensing the importance of the moment, but knowing it had to unfold without her intervention. Finally, Marion rose from her chair. "I think I remember a duet we used to play, if your father remembers his part." Elijah followed her to the piano, memories washing over him. How many hours had they spent side by side on a piano bench? His mother patiently guiding his hands, teaching him to hear the music beyond the notes? How many duets had they performed together at recitals and community events before he decided such experiences were beneath his new identity? They sat down together, the bench barely wide enough for both of them. Marion placed her hands on the keys, and after a moment's hesitation, Elijah did the same. "Bach," she said simply. "Jesu, joy of man's desiring. You always loved the harmonic progression?" "I remember," he said softly. She counted them in quietly, and then they were playing together. Marion taking the melody, Elijah the accompaniment. At first his fingers were stiff, uncertain on the keys, but muscle memory gradually returned, and the familiar patterns began to flow more naturally. It was far from a perfect performance. Both made mistakes, Marion occasionally hesitating as fatigue from her treatments affected her precision. Elijah stumbling over passages he once knew by heart. But there was something in the imperfection that felt right, honest, human, real. When they finished, The small living room was silent except for Zoe's delighted applause. "That was beautiful," Adele said, her eyes suspiciously bright. Elijah turned to his mother, finding her already watching him. "Thank you," he said simply, "for remembering." "I never forgot," she replied, "any of it." In that moment, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. The acknowledgement that what had been broken might still be mended, not to its original form, but into something new and perhaps stronger for having been rebuilt. Sometimes the most profound healing happens not through grand gestures, but through small moments of shared vulnerability. A duet played imperfectly, a meal shared across generations. The quiet acknowledgement of pain caused and endured. If you felt anything watching this reunion, like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and comment your favorite moment. As summer faded into fall, Elijah made a decision that surprised everyone except perhaps Adele. He relocated permanently to Providence, buying a comfortable house just 10 minutes from both Adele's home and his mother's bungalow. The East Coast headquarters of Resonance Technologies would now be based in Providence, with a special focus on educational applications of music technology. "You're really staying?" Zoe asked one afternoon as she helped him arrange furniture in his new home office. "For good?" "For good," Elijah confirmed. "My life is here now, with you, with your mother, with your grandmother, if you'll all have me." Zoe grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Mom will definitely have you. She tries to hide it, but she smiles differently when you're around." Elijah felt a warmth bloom in his chest. "Does she now?" "Totally. Grandma noticed it too. She says you'd better not mess up a second chance, or she'll have something to say about it." "I don't doubt that for a minute," Elijah laughed. "Your grandmother has always been formidable when she sets her mind to something." "Like you," Zoe observed. "And like me, I guess." "Exactly like you," Elijah agreed, seeing himself and his mother reflected in this extraordinary child. "The best parts of all of us, combined." When Marion's doctors confirmed her cancer was in remission, the celebration united their newly formed family in joy and relief. The shadow that had hung over their reconciliation lifted, allowing them to look forward rather than back. During this time of healing, an idea began to take shape in Elijah's mind, a way to honor the journey they'd all taken, separately and together. He spent weeks developing the concept, consulting with architects and education experts, before presenting it to Adele and Marion one evening after Zoe had gone to bed. "Symphony of Hope International," he said, displaying the renderings on his tablet. "A global hub for music education, technology, and community outreach, starting here in Providence, but with satellite centers planned for underserved communities nationwide." The design showed a modern campus built around the existing Symphony of Hope Center, expanded facilities for lessons and performances, state-of-the-art recording studios, community gathering spaces, and advanced technology labs where students could explore the intersection of music and digital innovation. The foundation would be endowed with enough funding to ensure operations in perpetuity, Elijah continued. With named scholarships for students who couldn't otherwise afford music education. Adele studied the plans, clearly impressed but cautious. "This is ambitious. The scope is far beyond what I ever imagined for Symphony of Hope." "That's the point," Elijah said. "Why limit the impact to one city or one region when we could reach children everywhere? Your vision, combined with my resources and technology, could transform music education globally." "And what would you call this grand venture?" Marion asked, her eyes twinkling with something like pride. Elijah's expression softened. "The Marion Winter Center for Musical Excellence would be the centerpiece of the campus. If she approves, of course." Marion's hand flew to her mouth, emotion overwhelming her customary composure. "Elijah, It's fitting," he said simply. "You were my first music teacher. You sacrificed everything so I could pursue my dreams. And when I rejected all of that, you still found a way to support the values you tried to instill in me. This center should bear your name." Tears shimmered in Marion's eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Adele encouraged, reaching for the older woman's hand. "Your legacy deserves to be recognized." Marion nodded, unable to speak through her emotion. Elijah continued, energized by their positive response. "We could break ground in the spring. The first phase could be operational within 18 months. I've already spoken with educational partners in Detroit, New Orleans, and Los Angeles who are interested in establishing satellite centers. You've thought of everything, Adele marveled. When did you have time to develop all this? Late nights, Elijah admitted, when I couldn't sleep for thinking about all the time I've wasted, all the years I spent chasing the wrong definition of success. Not wasted, Marion corrected gently. Perhaps those years were necessary for you to recognize what truly matters. Some lessons can't be taught, they must be lived. As plans for Symphony of Hope International took shape, so too did Elijah's relationship with Adele. What had begun as co-parenting evolved into friendship, partnership, and gradually something deeper. The feelings that had never quite died found new life, now enriched by maturity and shared purpose. One weekend in early spring, Elijah took Adele and Zoe to the coast, to a small beach house he'd rented on Martha's Vineyard. As the sun began to set over the water, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Elijah suggested a walk along the shore. "Can I come?" Zoe asked, looking up from the seashell collection she'd been organizing. "In a bit," Elijah said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Adele. "Your mom and I need to discuss something first." Adele raised an eyebrow, but followed him onto the beach. They walked in comfortable silence, the waves gently lapping at the sand beside them. "This is nice," Adele said finally. "Peaceful. I can't remember the last time I took a real weekend away." "You work too hard," Elijah observed, "always taking care of everyone else." Says the man who spent the last 6 months restructuring his entire company, planning an international music education center, and reconnecting with his estranged family. "Fair point," he smiled, taking her hand as they walked. "But I've never been happier doing it. Is that right?" Adele's tone was teasing, but her eyes were soft. "It is." Elijah stopped walking, turning to face her. 11 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life. I chose ambition over love, success over partnership, isolation over connection. Adele's expression grew serious. "Elijah, let me finish, please." He took both her hands in his. "When I left, I thought I was making a rational choice, sacrificing personal happiness for professional success. What I didn't understand then is that true success isn't measured in stock prices or market share. It's measured in moments of genuine connection, in the lives we touch, in the love we give and receive." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I lost my way for a very long time, but you helped me find it again. Through our daughter, through your foundation, through your remarkable capacity for forgiveness." Sinking to one knee in the sand, Elijah opened the box, revealing a ring, not an ostentatious diamond, but a simple band of rose gold set with a single perfect sapphire, the color of the ocean at dusk. "Adele Alloway, I love you. I love the family we've created. I love the vision we're building together. Will you marry me? Will you make official what is already true in my heart, that you and Zoe are my home, my purpose, my greatest joy?" Tears spilled down Adele's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, she managed, "Yes, Elijah, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a delighted squeal came from further up the beach. Zoe was running toward them, having clearly been watching from a distance. "Finally," she exclaimed, throwing herself into their embrace. "Does this mean we'll all live together officially now? And does this mean I get to be in the wedding? Can I play the processional? I've been composing one, just in case." Laughing through her tears, Adele gathered Zoe close. "Yes to all of that, and yes to whatever else you're planning, because I can see those wheels turning." Elijah wrapped his arms around both of them, his heart full to bursting. "I think our daughter might be a step ahead of us, as usual. She comes by it honestly," Adele said, gazing up at him with love in her eyes. The wedding took place the following autumn as the Symphony of Hope International campus neared completion. It was a small ceremony held in the nearly finished concert hall, the first event in a space designed to nurture generations of young musicians. Marion, resplendent in a silver blue gown, walked Adele down the aisle, a choice that had moved Elijah to tears when Adele first suggested it. "She gave me the most precious gift in my life when she raised you," Adele had explained. "It seems fitting she should be the one to give me away." Zoe, elegant in a dress that matched her grandmother's, played the processional she had composed. A piece that began with a single melancholy line, then gradually built into a joyful, complex harmony as Adele walked toward Elijah, radiant in a simple ivory gown. Their vows, written by each of them, spoke not of perfect love, but of forgiveness, of growth, of choosing each other anew each day. They acknowledged the pain of the past and embraced the promise of the future, their words echoing in the perfect acoustics of the hall they had created together. "Once I thought success meant building something that would outlast me," Elijah said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "Now I know that true legacy isn't found in companies or buildings, but in the lives we touch, the love we share, the family we nurture. You and Zoe are my greatest achievement, my truest success. I promise to never again lose sight of what matters most." Adele's vows were equally moving. 11 years ago, I thought our story had ended. I built a life without you, found purpose in our daughter, and in bringing music to children who needed it. But our chapter wasn't finished. It was merely paused. I promised to embrace this new movement in our symphony, to create harmony from what was once discord, to build a future worthy of the love we've rediscovered. As they exchanged rings, Zoe began to play again, her fingers drawing forth the melody she had composed for this moment. Notes that spoke of separation and reunion, of individual journeys converging into shared destiny. Later, at the reception held in the center's grand lobby, surrounded by family, friends, students, and colleagues, Elijah raised his glass for a toast. "To second chances," he said, his gaze moving from Adele to Zoe to Marion and back again. "To the family I almost lost, and to the incredible women who had the grace to let me find my way back. To music that heals, to technology that connects, and to love that transforms." Adele stood, adding her own words. "And to Symphony of Hope International, which opens its doors next month to children from every background, every circumstance. May they find here what music gave to me, a voice, a purpose, a home within themselves that can never be taken away." As evening fell, lights illuminated the new campus, a beacon of possibility shining into the gathering darkness. Inside, music and laughter filled the spaces designed for both. Elijah and Adele danced beneath the soaring ceiling of the lobby, their movements as harmonious as their newly joined lives. Watching from beside her grandmother, Zoe smiled in satisfaction. The composition she had begun the day she first met her father, tentatively titled Reunion, was nearly complete. The final movement would come tomorrow as they began their life as an official family. Not perfect, perhaps, but perfectly theirs. A symphony of second chances, of forgiveness, of love that had found its way home at last. 5 years later, the Symphony of Hope International had expanded beyond even Elijah's ambitious vision. What had begun as a single campus in Providence now included satellite centers in 7 cities across the country, with international partnerships developing in Kenya, Brazil, and India. The Marion Winters Center for Musical Excellence had become a destination for music educators worldwide, a place where traditional pedagogy and cutting-edge technology merged to create new pathways for learning. Elijah stood at the window of his office, watching as students crossed the courtyard below. Some carried traditional instruments, violins, cellos, flutes. Others clutched tablets loaded with music composition software developed by Resonance Educational Technologies, the new division he'd created specifically to support Symphony of Hope's mission. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to find Zoe, now 16, leaning against the doorframe. "Dad, did you forget? The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, and Mom says if you're late again, she's giving your voting rights to Grandma." Elijah laughed. "Your mother knows that's an empty threat. Your grandmother and I vote the same way on everything these days." "That's not what Grandma says," Zoe replied with a grin. "She told me she only lets you think you're winning to protect your fragile male ego." "Did she now?" Elijah shook his head, amused. The relationship he'd rebuilt with his mother over the past 5 years had deepened into something he'd never imagined possible. A partnership of equals, enriched by their shared history but not defined by it. As they walked together toward the boardroom, Elijah studied his daughter's profile. At 16, Zoe had grown into a remarkable young woman, confident, compassionate, and fiercely dedicated to the mission of Symphony of Hope. She'd inherited Adele's musical sensitivity and his technological aptitude. combining them in ways that continually surprised and delighted him. "How's the new app coming along?" he asked, referring to the project Zoe had been developing with a team of programmers, a platform designed to connect beginning music students with mentors worldwide. "Almost ready for beta testing," she replied, her eyes lighting up. "The latency issues are finally solved, and the interface is intuitive enough for even the youngest students to navigate. We're planning to launch with 50 mentors and 500 students next month." "Impressive," Elijah said, genuine pride warming his voice. "From concept to execution in less than a year." "I had good teachers," Zoe replied simply. The boardroom was already filling when they arrived. Adele stood at the head of the table, reviewing presentation materials with the development team. She looked up as they entered, her smile still capable of quickening Elijah's pulse after all these years. "There you are," she said. "I was about to send out a search party." "Blame Zoe," Elijah replied, dropping a kiss on his wife's cheek. "She was telling me about Grandma's conspiracy to undermine my voting authority." Adele laughed. "Marion does enjoy keeping you on your toes." As if summoned by her name, Marion entered the room. Elegant as always, despite the cane she now used on days when her energy was low. The cancer had returned briefly 2 years ago, but aggressive treatment had once again forced it into remission. The experience had left its mark, but had not diminished her spirit or determination. "Are we discussing my coup plans?" she asked, eyes twinkling as she took her seat. "I thought those were classified." "Nothing stays secret in this family for long," Elijah replied, helping her arrange her papers. "Not with a teenage intelligence officer in our midst." The meeting proceeded smoothly, with updates on fundraising goals, program expansions, and technology initiatives. What had begun as Adele's dream, nurtured by Marion's support and amplified by Elijah's resources, had grown into something that belonged to all of them, a legacy that would outlast them individually while honoring what each had contributed. Later that evening, as they prepared for the annual Symphony of Hope Gala, Elijah found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From the empty penthouse in Manhattan to this home filled with music, laughter, and love. From isolation to connection. From hollow success to meaningful purpose. "What are you thinking about?" Adele asked, appearing in the doorway of their bedroom. She was stunning in a midnight blue gown, her hair now streaked with more silver than when they'd reunited, but her eyes as warm and perceptive as ever. "About how differently things might have turned out," Elijah replied honestly, "if I hadn't seen that interview with you. If I hadn't flown to Providence that night. If you hadn't given me a second chance." Adele crossed the room to stand before him, straightening his bow tie with practiced ease. "But you did, and I did, and here we are." "Here we are," he echoed, drawing her close. "Against all odds." "Not against all odds," she corrected gently. "Because of them. Because we faced them together instead of alone." From downstairs came the sound of the front door opening, followed by Marion's voice greeting Zoe, who had gone to pick up her grandmother. Then piano music filled the house, grandmother and granddaughter playing a duet they'd been practicing for the gala. "We should go down," Adele said, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "They'll be waiting for us." "In a minute," Elijah replied, savoring the moment. "I just want to remember this. All of it, how it feels to be exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly the people I'm supposed to be with." Adele smiled up at him, understanding in her eyes. "That feeling? That's what real success feels like, Elijah. That's what we've been building all along." As they descended the stairs together, the music grew louder, Marion's experienced hands and Zoe's youthful energy creating something beautiful together. Elijah paused on the landing, watching his mother and daughter at the piano, their heads bent close in concentration, their movements synchronized despite the 6 decades between them. This was his legacy, not the billions in his bank account or the technology empire he'd built, but these connections, this family that had found its way back to each other against all odds, this love that had survived separation, hurt, and time. In the end, Elijah Winters had discovered what truly mattered, not through his achievements or acquisitions, but through the grace of 3 extraordinary women who had taught him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, only earned through presence, commitment, and love. And as he joined his family at the piano, adding his voice to their harmony, he knew with absolute certainty that he was, at last, the richest man in the world. For more powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and finding your way home, Subscribe to Mr. Whitman's Love Chronicles. If you felt anything watching this, like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and comment your favorite moment. And to those who haven't subscribed yet, this is your sign. Don't leave without joining the family.